In this video, we're going to look at installing Sharepoint Server on Windows Server 2016. The first thing we're going to do is turn on the DC1 and DC2 VMs. Next, we're going to clone the master. Right-click on Master, Manage, and click Clone. Click Next. Click Next, and we'll create a linked clone, and we're going to call this SP2016. I'm going to save this on our SSD drive. Then click Finish. Let's edit the virtual machine settings to make sure that the network adapter is set for our lab. Once that's been completed, go ahead and turn on SP2016. If you recall from our last video, the sysprep option came up to customize Windows, so we'll have to go through that again, and we'll also set our administrator password. I'm going to turn off IPv6 and then configure the network adapter. Next thing we're going to do is rename this VM and join it to the domain. And as you can tell, this one only has about 6 gigabytes of memory. We're going to turn it off and increase that to 8 at least. I'm going to go ahead and actually take it up to a little bit above 12 and then power it back on. Once it's powered on, we're going to log in as the domain administrator and download the Sharepoint ISO file. I'm also going to turn off the IE enhanced. Oh, we already turned it off in our master image, so that's good. So there's two things we actually have to get. We have to get the Sharepoint server ISO, and we also have to get the SQL Server ISO. Because in 2016 Sharepoint, they did not include the SQL Server Express. For some reason I'm not able to get out on the internet. Let's see what's going on here. I'm going to reset this network adapter and see if that resolves our problem. Alright, so we got that. We're able to get on the internet now. So we're going to save this on our desktop. And we're going to rename it SharePoint instead of Office Server. And while it's loading, we're also going to download SQL 2016 Express. And we can do basic installation of SQL and just go with the defaults. And actually, while that's going, we can also download the SQL Server Management Studio. So I'm going to pause the video while this finishes installing and downloading. Alright, so SQL is finished installing. We can go ahead and click close on this. And you can also see that the domain administrator is a SQL administrator. Our instance name is SQL Express. So I'm going to go ahead and install the SQL Server Management Studio. And I'm going to go ahead and mount the Sharepoint ISO just by double clicking on it, and that mounted it in Drive E. And I'm going to run the prerequisite installer once this SQL Server Management Studio install is finished. Alright, so we're going to click close on this and run the prereq installer. So the prereq installer is going to install all the roles and features that we need prior to installing Sharepoint. And it's important that the prereq installer, it'll actually reboot the server on its own. And where we double clicked on the CD to mount it, it's going to say that it couldn't find the installation file. So what we'll do after we reboot, we'll log back in. It's going to say it couldn't find the file. Then we're going to double click on the Sharepoint that we saved on the desktop, run the prereq installer again. It'll finish configuring, and then we'll probably restart one more time. Alright, so now we're seeing installation is complete. Let's go ahead and reboot this. And I'm resuming the video once we get back to the login screen. Alright, so we're logged back in. Let's launch Sharepoint disk, run the prereq installer one more time. Alright, so it's already finished. So now we can go ahead and run setup. For a product key, the easiest thing to do is just Google SharePoint 2016 Enterprise Trial. Okay, so I believe this is the key here. Yep. And of course we accept the terms. Go ahead and hit install. So this process is going to take several minutes, so I'm going to pause the video again. So we're at the finalizing installation step. Once this gets done, there is a chance that we will be prompted to reboot. If we're not prompted to reboot, I'm going to go ahead and reboot anyway. Anytime that there's a major application installed, I like to restart it. So we can see the new applications are being put in the program group here. All right. So we can go ahead and run the SharePoint configuration wizard now, or uncheck it. I'm going to uncheck it and go ahead and reboot. All right, so we're back at the login screen. I'm going to go ahead and log in as the domain administrator again. And we're going to go to the SharePoint 2016 products configuration wizard. And it's warning us that services are going to be started or reset during the configuration. And we're going to actually create a new server farm. So the database server, the reason we installed SQL Management Studio is so we could look at this database server and actually go in a little bit to the SQL database that's created with SharePoint. So the database server is going to be SP2016 / SQL Express, I believe. We'll find out here in just a second. So SP2016 / SQL Express. We're going to name it SharePoint config. This isn't recommended, but we're going to use the domain administrator account. If you remember when we installed SQL, the domain user, or the user that was logged in, was granted permission. Right, and it's wanting you to create a farm passphrase. This is so you can add other servers to the farm later on. And we're actually going to configure this as a single server farm. There's several different options. Front end, that's the web front end. When clients are accessing your SharePoint farm, you're probably going to have, if you have multiple front end servers, you're going to have a DNS entry for one of those. So it could be like SharePoint.lab.local, and that could be hitting one of several different web front ends. You've got the application server. That's the back end request. So you have the front end, the web server that connects to the back end application server. Distributed cache, that's fairly new. It speeds things up with requests that you get often. It helps load balance your environment. A search server, Search uses a lot of resources, memory and CPU, so having it separated helps improve performance. Or you could do custom, specify which parts you want in one machine. But we're going to do single server farm and click next. You can specify the port number that you want to put the central admin on. I'm going to put it in 5 nines. Oops. 4 nines rather. And then here's just a quick review that we're installing it on SP 2016, SQL Express, database name Sharepoint config. It hosts the central admin. That's the URL. That's the authentication provider and the server type. So it takes it a few minutes to set up the configuration database. Step 3 of 10 seems to take the longest. So hopping back over here to SSMS, you can see databases, and there's one you can see. As this progresses, we're actually going to see the configuration databases pull in. So I'm going to hit refresh every once in a while just so you can see that. I'm going to let this progress a little bit and then resume the recording. Alright, so let's see if we have any more databases now. It's still going, so let's give it a few more minutes. Alright, so now that we're on step 8, we should see more databases. Actually, I take that back. We're not going to see databases until we actually create our first web application. But while we're in here, you can right click on the database and see the size, how much space it's taking up. You can also do this, shrink the database if you're really running out of space, especially if you're using SQL Express. So you could shrink the database and then shrink files. That saves a little bit of space if you're getting close to reaching that 10 gigabyte limit. But with SharePoint 2016, there's not a foundation version. So in most cases, if you're using SharePoint, you're also going to have a full-blown SQL Server. Alright, so that's finished. So we're going to click finish, and it's going to automatically pop up the admin configuration page. And it's going to take several minutes because I'm about out of memory on my host. So I'm not going to participate in customer experience. And we're just going to configure it ourselves. So let's manage web applications. So all we have is a central admin page. Let's go ahead and do a new application. And we'll just call it SharePoint 80. That's fine. We want to allow anonymous for now. We can create a new app pool. And here's something that I always recommend for the database name. Name it something useful. So like this could be our intranet. Go ahead and click OK. And now what it's going to do is actually create that content database for us. And it's also going to create the IIS config. Let's go ahead and pull that up while we're waiting. So under sites, you can see that we have the default that started, and then we also have the central admin page. Application pools, you can see the same thing. The application pools for central admin, our default app pool. So after this finishes, we'll look at the SQL Server Management Studio where that database was created, and also IIS where that was created. All right, so now you should receive the message, create site collection. And I'm just going to call this intranet. Let's look at the different templates. You have team site, blog, developer, project, and community. Under enterprise, you have Visio, Search Center, Community Portal, My Sites, Enterprise Search, Compliance, Business Intelligence, Records, eDiscovery, and Place Hold, and Document Center. So for now, we'll just do a team site. And click OK. So it's going to create the content. So now under IIS, you can see that we have a new SharePoint 80 intranet home. We told it to create a new app pool. There that is. If we look in SQL here, you can see we have the WSS content intranet. So for a new site, it takes up almost 350 meg for just a blank site. So now we can browse to the site. So with SharePoint, historically it's always taken forever for sites to load the first time you use them. So for example, if you have the SP timer process running, it runs usually daily around midnight or so. It resets the application pool. And there's other reasons that the application pool would reset during the day. Whenever it resets, the website takes a while to get everything cached in memory. So a lot of times what you'll want to do is create a script that opens the site or refreshes that worker pool at a more convenient time. You don't want your users to come in at 8 o'clock and the website's taking forever to load. So if you have it run a script at say 5 a.m. where a computer's opening that site, that way it's already cached in memory on the web server, makes things a little bit more convenient for your users. You can see our SQL Server memory usage constantly increasing. So that's the very basics. I mean, we've barely scraped the surface of what you have to do to configure SharePoint. The next thing we're going to look at is setting up another server for Office web apps and connecting the two together. Why we would want to do that. And then the following video we're going to look at Exchange, setting it up, and the interconnectedness between Exchange, Office web apps, and SharePoint. So here real quick, just so you get an idea of why we would want to do Office web apps. If you do new right now, it's going to ask you what file you want to upload. So I'm just going to save this text file on the desktop. There we go. I'm going to do new, browse, test, okay. And there it is. That's now on our intranet. If you click on it, it opens up here because that's how the extension is supposed to read. It just opens it in the browser. But if that was a .doc file, it would want you to download it. With Office web apps, you can actually open the file in the browser, any browser, Chrome, Internet Explorer, Firefox, Safari, and edit the document if you have an editing enabled account. So we're going to look at that in the next video. Office web apps, it's a little bit tricky to configure. We're going to set it up like if we had it publicly accessible. so stay tuned.